Good morning. So today I'm going to tell you the journey St John Ambulance has been on with steps 2 and 4 in relation to telephone CPR and rapid dispatch. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, up to 15 Mississippi. Okay, tilt the head back, pinch the nose, put a breath in. Okay, chest has risen. Good, do that again. So that's what we were doing in 2002. So we've been doing telephone CPR for a long time. We haven't been doing it the way we should be doing it now. But that's all about learning, that's what research is about, and that's where the journey we've been on for the last few years. So we follow the improvements. We've gone to no breaths, chest only, compressions only, and we were working on a laminated sheet. So the call taker would get the call, identify that CPR was required, go through their drawer, pick out their laminated sheet, start reading off it, and that's how they'd access their CPR instructions. Not the best way to be doing that. So in May 2011, St John Ambulance moved on to ProQA, and thank you, Laura, for that demonstration there, so that assisted greatly. So that meant that our call takers were doing a consistent approach to CPR instructions. Our callers were all getting the same instruction, they were getting the same timing, they were getting the same information. What we still weren't doing properly were recognising when CPR was required. So in April 2017, we had our clinical leads come back from America very excited. They'd been to Seattle, they'd seen what's lauded as the best in CPR performance, the best results worldwide. So it was measured that we were coming in the middle of the field, and that wasn't good enough. So our clinical leads came to us and they said, we're here now, we want to be up here where Seattle is, there's no reason why we can't be. So we said, that's great. MPDS ProQA has version 13. We're going to be releasing it in November, 6 months' time. It's got fast track to hands on chest. It has identification. We move on quicker, we'll get that done. So we thought, well, that's great, we'll move on there. Our clinical lead said to us, no, that's not good enough. We need to do it now. We can't wait 6 months. We know we can fix this. We know we can start improvements. So that led us to an authorised non-compliance. So that's what that is ProQA tells us to do something. We moved away from that in a lead up to version 13 being released. We couldn't release that due to technical issues, training issues. There are a lot more things than just releasing a new software package. So where the caller identifies CPR in progress or the caller identified unconscious, no breathing verified, we'd get them straight onto going through the question. So again, we brought out a laminated sheet. We knew it was only going to be 6 months, but we put it out there for them so they'd have a fast track to be able to provide CPR to recognise the initial process. What we didn't expect initially was a bit of pushback from staff saying, well, we're going to be hurting people. This isn't right. We don't want to hurt people, we don't want to injure people, but we still want to give first aid advice. So we went to the clinical director and said, this is a concern they've got, we want to allay their fears. So we got our PDF form out before we laminated it again, and on there we put, CPR should not be withheld due to concern for causing injury to the patient. The benefit of CPR in an unconscious, not breathing patient outweighs any potential for injury. And so by simply putting that onto the PDF laminated sheet we had, that allayed the staff's fears. It got them engaged, it gave them some discussion about the fact we were actually listening to them while we weren't just pushing this process. So through that we identified, we've always given our call takers training, they know what AMI is, they know what heart disease is, they've been shown stats, but for some reason they weren't getting it, they weren't giving us a buy-in that we really needed them to. So every year we give them 2 days of training, which happens in November, so we had to work out what are we going to do a bit different this year. So Clinical had established a resus improvement coordinator, and that role is simply focused on improving resus. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of data, so we made sure we got a presentation from that person to be able to educate our staff. And then we went to the Pre-Hospital Resus and Emergency Care Research Unit, known as Pre-Crew, based at Curtin University. St John Ambulance has worked with Pre-Crew for a number of years now, and they've done a number of research projects within the State Operations Centre, getting a large amount of calls, listening to cardiac arrest calls, determining what issues there are, why it's not being identified, and using that data to then research further and progress it to the larger audience. What we hadn't been doing is giving that feedback back to our own staff. So we engaged with pre-crew who were quite happy to come on board and to show our own staff what we were identifying from what they were doing. So we had two different presentations, one being the recognition of cardiac arrest, and that was about informing them that, you know, there's 24% delayed recognition. But that doesn't mean delayed recognition is wrong. It means there's a reason that it hasn't been that we're not aware of. So the summary of the first area was that the call takers do have a big role in survival. They can make a difference. And it's getting them to really buy in and see that. And so this 24% is common. It's common across the world, but it can be changed. There was reference to the Norway project where they managed to bring it down. I don't know the numbers, but there was a distinct difference in what could be done. So there's evidence there to say we can make a difference. And it was the common theme along that was more recent arrests. So the more recent arrests, the more unlikely it was that it was identified initially. Then we also had the clue to agonal breathing. So this was a linguistic study, something very unique to what pre-crew had been doing previously, something very unique to where we'd been. So it's about identifying the clues about what wording is said when people don't say yes or no to are they breathing. The resistance that people put into their answer. They don't want to say no because they don't want to give the wrong information. Saying yes is easy if you know it is. So I was identifying the linguistics in the yes sort of answer, the yes is snoring, the yes is breathing with difficulty, the yeah but very, very faint. So rather than going into the breathing diagnostics tool, tell me when he takes a breath. The next breath. Instead of spending the time on that, going straight into CPR instructions based on wording that's identified as a no, but with a disclaimer. So in the summary for that area, it was that lay callers cannot be expected to know that agonal breathing is not effective breathing. Lay people don't know what agonal breathing is. We've taught our call takers, our communications officers, what agonal breathing is, what it can best be described as by the lay person. So they tend to describe agonal breathing as a type of breathing rather than the absence of breathing. So a lay person isn't going to know that a big snoring resp is agonal breathing. They think they're just snoring, they're just a bit uncomfortable. It's not necessarily identifying to them that someone is not effectively breathing. So the clues were provided to the call takers in relation to the agonal breathing. So it was the sounds that were in the background. So what sounds are being made, what can you hear? So they've listened to agonal breathing in recordings. So can you hear that in the background? That is your identifier. Key words used by the callers, things like grunting, things like snoring. They're identifiers that will tell us that's where we are. And also qualifications, reservations and ambiguity when the caller says the patient is breathing, yes, but. So if it's not a definitive yes, let's go with it's not breathing. So then we went on to the quality process at the same time. So once our clinical leads were back from the US, it was hitting the ground running. We've got to get things done, we can do it now. So we started a manual phone audit of almost all of our cardiac arrest calls that came in. So it was to determine out-of-hospital cardiac recognition, when it was recognised, when CPR instruction times were identified. We tried doing this by software and we found that the results weren't correct. So we went back to the Excel spreadsheet, one person with headphones on, listening to the call, marking down time intervals. We only used 2 reviewers to do this process over the 5 months we ran it for to make sure we had a limited bias related into that. It was very labour intensive, very hard to listen to a lot of CPR calls, so the 2 reviewers we had did a great job in relation to that. In the future, we can again do another 5 months, compare it to what we managed to get in 2017. But at the moment, we've got that 5 months of data that we've done some work on, done some papers on to get that information out there. In the future, AI, it's been mentioned here a couple of times already today, that may well be the way to be able to go through and pick up those timestamps. But at the moment, we haven't found a software system that can do it. It's down to manual process, which can be very labour intensive, as I say, and very distressing for people who have to listen to a lot of those calls. So we still have 10% reviewed from a call taker compliance level. So that's more about following process, making sure that we do the hands on chest timely, we follow the steps we're meant to take, and the process that is identified in ProQA MPDS. So we don't do our timestamps at the moment, but that's something we can pick up again. We have the background to be able to do that, we just don't have the resources. So rapid dispatch. Rapid dispatch from the State Operations Centre comes down to a bucket of ProQA codes. So a confirmed not breathing code is then identified, and while the call taker is still on the phone through the MPDS process that Laura showed us earlier, the dispatch will happen while the call taker is still on the phone. So the call taker doesn't have to do anything but press one button, the send will happen. So for St John Ambulance, we have built into our CAD that we have 3 call cards created at the same time. So rather than one person have to duplicate and identify CPRs required, 3 call cards appear, one for our primary response crew, which is an ambulance crew, backed up by a secondary ambulance crew, and then a specialist will arrive with the Lucas device. Our last bit in our rapid dispatch is address verification. So once we can get that faster, we're going to be able to find that we move on and get our vehicles out quicker as well. So at the moment we're involved in the advanced mobile location, which will hopefully be will be in Australia in May 2020. We have a thing called the BEN signs, which are beach emergency number signs. Unfortunately, a gentleman named Ben Geraghty was killed by a shark down in Mandurah back in 2016. And as a result of his brother's initiative, these signs have been introduced into Western Australia. We've got about 1,000 of them out there now, which are located in our CAD. And we also have our first responder app, which will be addressed later during the day to give you a bit more information on that. So thank you very much, and enjoy the conference.